This video goes through assigning codes in thematic analysis. The material for this video was taken from page 60 of a book by Virginia Braun and Victoria Clarke called Thematic Analysis, A Practical Guide, which was published in 2021 by Sage Publications. And it is publicly available online by Sage. I just checked that. Now, these two researchers are kind of the authority on when it comes to thematic analysis, in that they've done a lot of research on thematic analysis, the types of thematic analysis, and in particular, their method, which is now common standard of reflexive thematic analysis. But in this video, I will be talking about assigning codes according to or based on thematic analysis if you are following this method during your research or when you conduct your research study. So Braun and Clarke have got, they outlined three separate rules or three guidelines that would help you assign codes when you have, say, you've done an interview with an individual or a group of people, and you are going through the recordings and the transcripts. How do you start assigning codes to these material? So Braun and Clarke have got, they outlined three separate guidelines, which are very useful to think about when you want to assign codes. So the first one, the first rule, if you like, is don't just copy the data. What do they mean by that? So the principle behind this guideline is that a code label, the label that you put to a code, to a segment of information, should reduce the mess of the data, whether it is a paragraph, whether it is a sentence, and summarize the meaning you are identifying in the data extract. So don't just copy the data, but provide some sort of think about a summary or think about reducing that paragraph or that sentence into something meaningful. The second rule is identify the particular angle of the meaning. What do they mean by that? Well, a good code label should not be too broad and should contain some indicator of the specific meaning in the data. The third rule is indicate your analytic take somehow, in a way. And what is this principle about? A code label often contains some indication of your interpretive take. So in particular, what you think is important or interesting about this particular meaning of the sentence or the paragraph that you are drawn into. So these are the three guidelines that I found also personally very useful when it comes to assigning codes after you've done your interview or and you have the transcripts, you have the recordings, and you start going through them. How do you start assigning codes for the first time and then thereafter? And here I will give an example of just a piece of a small paragraph that I put together myself, so it doesn't come from a study, just to show you what kind of, how do you assign codes for this example, or for this extract in particular. So I'll read through this example, and you can pause at any time. You can pause the video and read this extract yourself. So the example says, and let's pretend that this came from a participant, a study participant during the interview. I'm finding it hard to study at home. My house is a mess, and I have kids. Whenever I try to study and concentrate, I hear neighbors next door. It is so noisy, the walls are thin, and you could hear everything. I even hear their dog barking and kids playing. So I try to put on my headphones, etc., etc. So when you see this segment, an extract of your transcript or recording, how do you start assigning codes? So I listed here some examples that you might think about. Could we say the person was talking about, or the summary is about noisy house, or no concentration? noise versus. So think about, like, look at these examples that I've put in and think about the differences between them. So let's take the first one, noisy house or no concentration. In the noisy house here, we could see the analytic angle kind of bearing on the segment or the extract of data. So if I say was looking at some sort of factors that I could associate with housing and people, I may decide to put in, oh, this is about noisy house. And also, you could also label this segment as no concentration, because maybe you're looking at participants who are studying, maybe, and you're looking at how they are affected, what affects their study in particular. So you may label this segment no concentration. So maybe you're looking at impacts, and so on. Also, so this is the third rule by Braun and Clarke. So think about the analytic angle that you're coming from, because this will label your codes in a totally different way from each other. Now think about these the two next sets of proposed code labels that I've put in: noise versus noisy house. You could see that the second rule by Braun and Clarke applying noise, very general, it doesn't say much, versus noisy house. Noisy house gives us a bit of an indication, maybe you're looking into houses, research into houses, what sort of things influence people. Here we are, being a bit more specific. We're saying not just noise, noisy houses. Now, look at the third example of code labels that I've put in: ways to cope versus noise from neighbors. So you can see here, like, if you look at the segments and you're kind of trying to put a label that kind of summarize the text. So maybe I'm looking at ways to cope, noise from neighbors. So in a way, it kind of also gives you more meat into the label that you're trying to include. So hopefully this gives you an example and also explain the guidelines of by Braun and Clarke of how to assign codes for, say, qualitative interviews and so on, in using their thematic analysis method.